Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 14th podcast of Christian Truth or Apologetics. And today we have Vocab Malone out of the Furious Three of, John McCrae, Vocab Malone, and David Wood. So why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Well, as you said, my name is Vocab. I'm over here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've been doing apologetics in various ways for over a decade, as I guess you might want to call a amateur practitioner, something like that. I've done graduate work as well, but that doesn't necessarily equip you for apologetics. It certainly can help you, but it's not like I went to seminary to become an apologist per se. It's not really how that works. But mainly from street evangelism, I would try to learn how to deal with arguments that were presented as I would share the gospel in those scenarios. And so the main things that I deal with are things that I've come across in my travels of street evangelism on the street. And that entailed atheism. And that's why we're going to be talking about the Christ myth theory today, because a lot of the atheists I was dealing with at the time were all about the Christ myth theory. And that also entails more recently Islam and the Black Hebrew Israelites, kind of some of the three main areas that I've dealt with, and also more, not as much out on the street, but more in the neighborhood and things like that. Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and to an extent, Roman Catholics. Those have been some of the main groups I've interacted with as far as apologetics go. And I am involved with sort of a subspecies of apologetics, sometimes called urban apologetics, which deals with issues specifically in that context of the city, as well as people who are influenced by those ideas, which emanate, generally speaking, from the city environs. So that's me. Got a website, vocabmalone.com. Got another one, streetapologist.com. Has more of a blog feel. And of course, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, all as Vocab Malone. That's the last thing I'll mention. I upload videos on YouTube almost daily, and they're all usually apologetic and worldview analysis type videos. So check me out there. That's what's up. Glad to be on the show.
Cool. So what out of the groups you named there that you interact with, which one do you think is the hardest to interact with?
Well, depends what you mean by hard as far as difficulty goes, because when it comes to intellectual challenge, I think that atheism, usually most atheists, now I know there's ill-informed atheists, and I sometimes make fun of them through satire, but overall, in my view, on the whole, I view atheists as more well-informed about a lot of these matters than a lot of the other groups, and they tend to have a somewhat broad range of areas they dabble in. So it can be challenging because of that, because there's a lot of areas you've got to get into with that. Now, I don't think atheism is a credible worldview at all. It starts with epistemological and ontological problems. However, that doesn't mean that any individual atheists don't bring up credible attacks or attacks that have teeth to them, is what I mean by that. So in one sense, atheism. However, there's another sense in which I would say Islam. And that's because of the sheer sort of power and strength that people perceive it having, and the fear that comes as a result of that. So if you engage in apologetics with Muslims, sometimes you're automatically painted as some kind of person attacking, and everyone that you're interacting with is sometimes painted as a victim, which is really backwards. And all these labels and ideas get thrown around that have nothing to do with the conversation, such as, racist, bigot, all these buzzwords that aren't even the matter at hand, because we're talking about Islam, a set of ideas in relationship to who God is and whatnot. But nonetheless, there's massive trouble that comes with Islam, and also it poses the most credible threat to your physical person. That's not trying to be facetious or anything like that. That's just a real fact I think that people should recognize if they really get into this. But then another group that's most difficult to deal with are the Black Hebrew Israelites, because they are certainly the least reasonable. They're the least cordial. This is generally speaking. Some Hebrew Israelites going to be watching this and be offended at what I'm saying. I am generalizing, but I've dealt with all these groups, so I am comparing and contrasting. I've got atheist friends because they've shown themselves to be friendly, and I've done the same. I tried that with Hebrew Israelites. They simply won't have it. That's not in their ability, apparently, to be friends with someone they disagree with. So they're very difficult to deal with because they, generally speaking, have no idea how to read sources. They don't really understand the concept of primary sources. Their discernment in these matters is very suspect. Often they don't understand how to build arguments. They engage in logical fallacies, and they don't really utilize the tools of logic when they build their cases, if you want to call it a case. Excuse me. So there's a lot of rhetoric and flourish that goes along, and there's a lot of emotional issues attached. So those three groups are difficult in different ways.
So I'm like we talked about before the stream. The Black Israelite or Hebrew Israelites, what is their main worldview and so on? Like what's the controversy there?
Boils down to they believe that the descendants of certain oppressed peoples, primarily currently dwelling in the Western Hemisphere, are the blood descendants of the ancient biblical Israelites, and that fact of their lineage supposedly comes with certain responsibilities, but not just responsibilities, salvific opportunities and ruling opportunities which other so-called nations and ethnic groups do not possess. That's sort of the essence of it.
Sort of sounds like Mormonism, the lost tribe of Israel, or the Indian migrants here.
The Anglo-Israelites, of which Mormonism borrowed from, were before the Black Hebrew Israelites, and they just flip a lot of those arguments on their head to be certain. For example, well, Dan went through Europe. How do you know? Well, Denmark. It sounds like Dan's mark. Dan left his mark in Northern Europe. Well, Dan actually wandered through Africa. How do you know? Sudan. You actually get these kind of arguments. So,
are those actual arguments?
The first one was. The second one is partly parody, partly true. But yeah, so yes, these are the kinds of arguments. And also with Mormonism, you have this idea that the Native Americans are descendants, of course, as well. And with that, it's helpful because you can go into the literature debunking that claim in relationship to history and DNA done by people already. And that can be used against Hebrew Israelites because certain sects of the Hebrew Israelites, of which we call one Westers, they believe that Native Americans are also descendants of primarily the northern tribes. For example, Gad and Reuben, they claim. And so there's been some work done in that area. But the thing's a mess, Hebrew Israelism. And the problem is no one takes it seriously, so they don't really deal with it. Yet it's growing, so we've got to deal with it.